So yeah, my name's Sean Kelly. I'm the Senior Manager for Music at Arts Council England. I look after the fund that Craig was referring to, the Support and Grassroots Music Fund. It's been running in various iterations since 2019. Uh, but we're actually talking about it at a really good moment because it's just been extended for a further year up until March 2026. And it's funded through, have to say this bit, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport via the Creative Industries team. So we're very grateful to have an extra year of funding. So it's a really good time to be getting this information and to be considering about making an application to the fund. So what we're going to talk to you today about, or I'm going to talk to you today about, I'll not go through the whole list, but we're just going to give you a really good overview of supporting grassroots music and National Lottery project grants. And that's because supporting grassroots music nests within the framework of National Lottery project grants. We'll hopefully give you some good case studies, tell you a little bit about what you can apply for, a little bit about procedural stuff in the process, and we'll get you a bit of information about the sister fund as well, the Early Career Promoter Fund, which I absolutely love and hopefully some of you have already heard about. So, can I get a hands up? Who's heard of National Lottery project grants in the room? Okay, great. You're going to hear information you've heard before then. No, but it's our main open access funding programme. It's for arts, museums and libraries projects. It's our most popular programme. It's funded by the National Lottery. I've been at the Arts Council probably about 9 years and it's been open pretty much every day since I've been working there. So it's basically to fund projects, anything that has a start date and has an end date and tries to do something that allows the English public to access work, see events, and it usually involves one or more of our supported disciplines. So we're here today to talk about music primarily, but we also cover visual arts, dance, literature, theatre, combined arts, a whole raft of other disciplines as well. So time-limited priorities are something with a specific area of focus that's listed on a website and have their own information sheet, and you apply through project grants. Now, why that's important is because supporting grassroots music is a time-limited priority, so it nests within project grants. And what that means is, as well as the criteria of supporting grassroots music, you also have to apply the criteria of the wider project grants. So we're going to be talking about both criteria simultaneously today. The good thing about that is if you find yourself sort of sitting on the boundary of supporting grassroots music, or you hear me give a criteria that means that you aren't eligible for supporting grassroots music, in all likelihood you're going to be, if you're doing something creative or cultural, in all likelihood you're going to be eligible for some project grants. So the information should hopefully still be applicable for you. So what is grassroots music? This causes us a lot of trouble at Arts Council actually, because everybody has a different interpretation of what it means. Um, what's grassroots for one person is not grassroots for the other. But really, the things on the screen are what we're talking about. So it's the sort of spaces and places where new and emerging artists perform, where careers in music begin, where new audiences are developed, and where communities of fans and music lovers are built. So it's the cradle of new music, really, and that's what we're talking about, the types of spaces that Craig was just talking about in the little introduction he done just now. So the key information of supporting grassroots music, and a reminder that project grants criteria is wider than this, but you can apply for £1,000 to £40,000, projects lasting up to 3 years. It has to benefit people and communities in England. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat to that in that it could benefit people and communities in England either in the short, medium and long term. So the reason I mention that is you might think something like a research and development project or an organisational development project might not be benefiting English audiences immediately, but you'll be given the opportunity in the application form to demonstrate why those changes might help you benefit English audiences a little bit further down the line. So don't think that that sort of excludes or precludes you from applying because it doesn't have immediate benefit. So supports organisations and individuals working in the grassroots music sector, and it's available to venues for live and electronic music, music promoters, music festivals, recording studios and rehearsal studios. And it's genre agnostic, so provided it's sort of working at the emerging end of the music sector, we don't care what genre of music's it in. We're open to all genres, and really we want to fund as many different genres as we possibly can. I think it's being recorded. Is Yeah, it's being recorded. So yeah. So uh, there's really two core criteria for supporting grassroots music, and the two things we really want grassroots music organisations to do is develop audiences and develop talent. But there's obviously lots of ways that you can do that. So here's some of them up here. It's not exhaustive. So bring new and live electronic music to the public, support the development of talent, help start careers, work in partnership across the grassroots music sector. For me, that's one of the most important. Improve access to a range of musical experiences, support new work and new approaches to developing new audiences, and make organisations and practitioners more sustainable. And that includes capital and building projects. And that's why I've just mentioned the thing about organisational development and how you might be able to impact audiences a little bit down the line with that new PA system. You might not see the immediate benefit, for example. So yeah, just wanted to give you a couple of case studies to kind of help you envisage the type of thing we're talking about. So this is something we funded in the Midlands. It was a 3-month season of weekly shows that centred Birmingham as a touring destination for jazz artists nationally and internationally. So on the day of the show, touring musicians delivered masterclasses in partnership with local universities. And the aim was to develop a strong community of artists across the city and to support pathways into jazz music through both programming and outreach. And the project leads also received mentoring for themselves from Tomorrow's Warriors. I suppose one of the reasons we chose that example is it shows a little bit of the ambition of the projects. They weren't just doing their series of events, they were thinking more widely about the grassroots music sector in that application as well. What Craig was talking about when he was talking about meeting the funder halfway, helping us meet our priorities in the grassroots music sector as well. And then the second case study is about, as I just said, my favourite projects where venues or grassroots music organisations are working collaboratively. So music venue Revelation led a consortium bid from 4 music venues in Ashton Town Centre. And basically, they wanted to do a month-long celebration of grassroots music. So something we often see, they showcased new emerging artists from their region alongside established artists to attract the crowd. And the partnership working allowed them to deliver on a much grander scale than would be possible through any of the 4 music venues working on their own. Not going to read out the list of everything they've done there, but they've done a lot of stuff. When you think that the grassroots funding is only up to £40,000, I'm not actually quite sure how much they got funded in the end. But those 4 venues working together were able to do a lot more with that money by working collaboratively than they would have been able to do on their own. Yeah, so unfortunately, there's some stuff you can't apply for. International activity, we don't have that much money available to us. So the money that we do have, we want to uh, keep centred in the grassroots music sector in England as much as possible. So for that reason, really, we don't fund any international activity in supporting grassroots music. We used to, we just decided that we would rather contain it within a sector that needs money a lot itself at the moment. Um, I should say again that you can apply for international activity through National Lottery project grants, just supporting grassroots music. That doesn't apply. So we can't apply for work that won't eventually reach people in England. You can't apply for things that have already happened. You can't say, sounded like Sean would fund my event last month and expect me to find the money to fund it. Unfortunately, we can't fund individual bands, artists, or agents through supporting grassroots music. But again, we can fund them through core project grants and another program that I'll mention a little bit later called Developing Your Creative Practice. And we can't support all your business running costs. This isn't quite correct, this slide. We can fund commensurate running costs or overheads related to the project. So if Craig was putting on a week-long series of events, we could pay his rent for the week commensurate to that project. So we just can't pay your ongoing overheads, but we can prepay a proportion of them related to the project. And finally, we don't, and this is very odd for the Arts Council, really fund projects that focus exclusively on children and young people. And that's because when I mentioned at the start, the funding comes from the creative industries team at the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And what that means is we're trying to support the professional end of the sector. So the closer those children and young people are to professional work, the more chances is we'd be able to support them through supporting grassroots music. If it was a professional development program aimed at 15 to 16-year-olds, that would potentially be fundable. But if you're looking at an educational program at 8 to 10-year-olds, it's unlikely that we would support it. But again, you can support it through National Lottery project grants. Yeah, so some of the more procedural stuff now, you can apply for 30,000 or less at supporting grassroots music and you'll get a decision in 8 weeks. Or you can apply for 30,000 and 40, between 30,000 and 40,000 and you'll get your decision in 12 weeks. As Craig said, every funder has a strategy. Ours is called Let's Create. I'm not going to go into all the details around Let's Create. I'll just say a couple of things. It's built around these 3 outcomes. Uh, the main thing you need to realise is if you're applying for under £30,000, you don't need to read our strategy. Our application form will ask you questions in a kind of sneaky way to get the answers we need to understand if your project meets our strategy. But if you're applying for over £30,000, you're expected to read our strategy. So we'll ask you direct questions about Let's Create. The only other thing I would point out in the context of that our strategy is inclusivity and relevance. Broadening access to arts and culture is the absolute core of the Arts Council's work through Let's Create. So I would always advise applicants as a tip to make sure they're trying to make sure that experiences that people wouldn't normally have are being considered, consideration of barriers, what the decisions you're making within your applications, why are you making them? Are you making them so it's available to everyone or a select few? Just to be considerate about how you're inclusive and relevant in delivering your projects. So yeah, some of you may have applied via Grantium. It's all an online grant making software. I'll not go through all the details of it, but everything's done on the grant making software. You go through these steps. The best bit of advice I can give you when you're going on the Grantium is if you get stuck, we have a brilliant customer services team who are at the end of the phone and really, really expert in helping you with inquiries related to Grantium. So there's guidance on the website. Do your best to sort of complete these steps. And if you get stuck, our customer services team are there to help. So yeah, this is just a quick rundown of the application form. We're going to ask you about your project, sort of at a glance and in a bit more detail. We're going to ask you about people and communities, who will experience and where. And that's very much where that inclusivity and relevance thing that I just talked, investment principle that I just talked about comes into play. Then we're going to ask you about your planning and your management of the project. So things like your timeline, which partners are you working with, your budget, how you've worked out whether you're paying musicians and other practitioners fairly, any match funding you might need, risks and challenges. So it's basically anything about the management of the overall project. And then finally, we'll ask you about you and your organisation and the sort of demographic makeup of your organisation. And the reason we ask those questions, which are anonymised, is because traditionally sub-communities have been underserved by arts funding, and we can use that information to kind of positively direct funding to people that have been underserved in the past. So when we're making decisions, we have kind of 2 decision-making pillars. One is how will your project make a difference? And we will look at these group of things. So do you have a clear creative and cultural idea? Does your project show ambition? Are there clear plans to reflect on your progress? And do you understand the difference you want to make yourself? And then people and communities. So are the people you're planning to reach involved in the design and planning of the project? How do you know your audience wants what you think it wants? Does the project team reflect the communities you want to reach? It's kind of a similar idea. If you want to understand an audience, involving them in their project and asking them is the best way to do it. And are people likely to be able to fully access the project and feel included? And that's kind of what I was talking about, your consideration of barriers. That could be things like your ticketing structure, the accessibility of the venue, what promoters you're working with, how you're marketing, how you're marketing your event and who to. So all these, the issue is there's no one size fit all. It's about your project and your bespoke approach to making sure that people and communities feel welcome in your project. And then the second criteria for decision making is really around the management. So Are there appropriate partnerships in place to deliver the activity? I think this is a super important one because people feel like in an application form, they have to pretend they can do everything and you don't. What you can do is you can find someone that can do that thing, pay them and make them a partner in your project. And that means people that don't have experience in doing anything can kind of reach outside their comfort zone and do something that's a bit more ambitious than what they previously have done. So partnerships to help you deliver ambitious activity, I think is really important. Budget and match funding. Is the budget appropriate for the project? Is the level of match funding appropriate for the project? You technically have to have a minimum of 10% match funding, but there is a sort of disclaimer box that will allow you to say why you haven't been able to reach it 10% if you can't. I think, got a question? So match funding is just additional income into a project. I'm using funder jargon now, but it's basically other income. So that can be things like your ticketing income. It could be things like private income that someone's put in. It could be a crowdfunder. It could be support in kind. So if a venue's donating some of their time to you for free, that would all contribute to the additional income that's contributing to the project. So we used to ask always for 10%, but as I say, you can sort of make a case why maybe you have a barrier and haven't been able to raise that 10% match funding. And is your budget appropriate for the project? My advice on budgets is always sort of like what your math teacher used to say, show you're working out. More detail is better. Let us know. Don't put £10,000 down for marketing and don't say what you're going to spend it on, for example. We need to know the detail of how you're going to spend what it is so we know of the reasonable costs. So the more detail, the better. And then we're going to ask you whether we're going to make a decision on whether you've appropriately considered risk, whether your project is realistic and well planned, and have the investment principles been used to support the development of the project. And those were the 4 investment principles that only people that are applying for over 30,000 and have read Let's Create really need to understand. So just very quickly, our decision-making process. So you submit an application and then we do an eligibility and risk check. An eligibility and risk check is checking for things that mean that we're technically not allowed to give you the money. So it might be something like your budget is unbalanced. You've sort of said in the narrative somewhere that you want to buy a mixing desk, but haven't told us anything about it in the budget. That would look to us like a major risk, and we would say that your project's ineligible. The good thing about the eligibility check is it allows us to take things out of the process quickly. So you wouldn't have to wait that 8 weeks to get your eligibility check. If you've done something technically wrong in the application form, you'll get notified as soon as we see it, and you can fix it and reapply. But if you pass that eligibility check, there's sort of a split in the decision-making process for the applications. If you're £30,000 or under, it'll go straight to the decision-making panel where a group of relationship managers will make a decision on it. If your project's over 30,000, a relationship manager will write an assessment or an appraisal of that application, and then that's what goes to the decision-making panel to make a decision. Obviously, we'll let you know the decision either way. If your project is not funded, we'll let you know why, but the level of feedback differs depending on the level of application. Over 30,000, you get your full assessment report that's been written that we've used to make the decision. But under 30,000, you get like a tailored statement, which is usually a few sentences explaining why we feel we weren't able to support your project. So this is just a little bit of information on that other program that I mentioned earlier, which is developing your creative practice. The key difference between national lottery project grants and developing your creative practice for me is that the main beneficiary of DYCP, as we call it, is you, the individual, as a creative practitioner. And obviously, as I said earlier, the main beneficiary of National Lottery project grants is usually the English public. So for DYCP, you can apply for between £2,000 to £10,000. It's only up to 1 year the activity can last. It's up to 4 deadlines per year and decisions in up to 10 weeks. I think we're currently in the middle of a decision-making process. So you're not actually open for applications at the moment. But just follow our socials and you'll be able to get the information about it when it reopens. But yeah, it's really for anything that would help you make a step change in your career. Maybe you need to go to a songwriting camp. Maybe you need to work with a particular producer. Maybe you need to travel abroad to see something for research and development. It's about your own personal development. And for that reason, it's really very competitive. So yeah, just a little bit about advice. So Project Grant's website is one of the best places to go for advice, and our customer services team I've already mentioned. But what's very lucky, where I'm very lucky in the support and grassroots music, is that I've got a team of relationship managers who are employed specifically to do development work. One of them's at the back of the room and is going to be chatting to you all later. They we done an evaluation of support and grassroots music back in March 2023, and one of the things that came back out of that evaluation was that people really valued the ability to talk to people, and particularly first time applicants that didn't understand our jargon, didn't understand what match funding meant. So we've employed a team of people, one per Arts Council area, to specifically do that development work. All you need to do is email that email address, supportandgrassrootsmusic@artscouncil.org.uk. Tell us a little bit about your project. Tell us where you're based. And provided the project's something that we technically can fund, you can have a conversation with one of those people, sort of no questions asked. So access support. So this is basically our program of that allows us to make all our funding a little bit more accessible. So if you experience any barriers to applying, we can help. We've got an access support team. Uh, if you get in touch with Access at artscouncil.org.uk, they can do things like provide guidance in alternative formats. They're going to pay for a support worker to help you input your application in the Grantium. Within reason, they can really consider any requests. So if you do have any barriers to making applications, please do reach out to them, and they'll help you out. And the other thing probably to mention is personal access costs. This bit in the middle. So personal access costs are any costs you or the practitioners you're working with incur when you're putting on a project. And we don't think that you should have to use your main project budget for those costs. So if, for example, you had a couple of £1,000 for a support worker and we're applying for £29,000, we would still consider your application as an under £30,000 application. That £2,000 isn't considered as part of your core budget because, as I say, it's something that you need to put on the project and we don't count that. And getting towards the end, I promise. So the Early Career Promoter Fund is the sister fund of supporting grassroots music, I suppose is the best way to do it. In that evaluation that I mentioned earlier, the other thing that some people said was our application process was a little bit too onerous for lower levels of funding if you're a promoter. So we work with the PRS Foundation to create a lighter touch application process for early career promoters. So they can use that funding, grants of up to £3,500. It's important to say that early career doesn't mean young as an age. That's early career and experience level. It's for the promotion of live and electronic music and any associated personal development activity, but it also includes a program of wraparound support. And I'm pleased to say that it's also been extended to March 2026, and PRSF will be announcing some more information on their website soon about the parameters, which might be slightly different from last year.